get some distance. Very often people talk about going to the top of a tall building, in some way or another, getting a bigger view of what's going on, stepping away from oneself, as it were. And that these three classes of perspective are very useful to know about and be able to move among. Just like we were doing an organization of time, such that we were organizing our attention towards the future, yet bringing resources from the past into that future. So it's a way to begin to appreciate that within you and without you, there are these multitude of resources. That is, that there's all the people you have ever met inside you in some way who could be a model for this or a model for that. That there's your entire personal history. Times when you had emotions you're exquisitely proud of, other times that you're not. But the point is, all of those and all of in between can be made available to you as a kind of a resource. Something that you can then utilize for the future. After all, it's your experience, you paid for it, you took the time to tap it, you can now reapply it. And that other people around you are also resources in the sense that you can observe them and find out how they do what they do. And knowing what you're beginning to know about this instrument, this body that each of us has, that if the eyes are up and the breathing is up, we know the person's visualizing more. And if they're down and they're in the body more, or when they lean over here and they're talking, we know just by postural differences that certain parts of the brain are accessed more. So literally by taking on the posture, the way somebody sits, the way the rhythms they move, you begin to get an organization similar to theirs for taking on some of that skill. Now that doesn't mean that if you modeled a jet pilot and you learn to sit really confidently, and hold the stick and all that, that you get to drive the plane home I'm on. No. But I would offer you this, that when you step into that kind of calm, and when you have that slow rhythm you see the pilots often have, that your mind will be clear to begin to learn the details of the task of being a pilot more easily than it would be if you approached it in a non-pilot manner. Does that make sense? Yeah, so it isn't so, in some senses, like NLP had claimed in the past about, anybody can do anything and you can learn anything instantly. Yeah, if it's an instant kind of learning. A lot of the things that are worth learning in life are more complicated than that. They involve states, they involve strategies, they involve beliefs, they involve orientations in time, certain kinds of acuity about people or about numbers or other things. And yet if you begin to get the states of mind, if you get the rep systems that people are using, you've got the containers into which each of those learnings needs to go. That makes it much, much easier. I'll give you an example. A dear friend of mine, she learns languages like other people eat their breakfast cereal. Very, very easily. Would you like to know one of her secrets? Sure. Works like this, is you go to a music shop and you listen to music from that country, the more traditional folk or the more natural voice that is, as opposed to hip-hop, right? French hip-hop. It's a terrifying thought. And you listen to the music, you find a voice of your gender that you like, and you bring that home and you play it. You just play it, listen to it, you're cleaning the house, you're making dinner, you're sitting around in the evening, and what will happen is you'll learn to hear those rhythms, and you'll get into sync with that music, and suddenly you have got the basis of the right breathing patterns. I say suddenly, suddenly after listening to it for hours and hours, but you're doing something enjoyable as well. This is terrible. You got to go find wonderful music to listen to. Yeah, and then you're listening to it, and you kind of get into the rhythm, and then you're into the rhythms of the language. Plus, you're tuning your ear to those sounds without even being aware of it. And then when you go to produce those sounds, they have what's called, in one theory of language, of criteria for the sound. Whereas what most people do when they go to learn a foreign language is the first thing they try to do is communicate. And what they do is they hear somebody say something, and they hear it wrong, and then they repeat it wrong, and then they memorize what they repeated, and then that gets stuck in there at first. And so then you got people with a local accent, in the language. Whereas you could really move up your accent simply by, first you're just going to listen to and then you get into what are they saying? And then the step 2 in this is, it's called pragmatics in language. Step 2 is you don't learn the details. This may bear something on our own learning. You don't learn the details, you learn a whole phrase. You learn out what a whole phrase means. You say the whole thing and you watch somebody smile, you go, oh, that worked. So you get whole bits of sound. You don't even know what you're saying necessarily, but well, this is what you say, if you want a coffee. I'm in Italy, and what did I do? I'd watch the movie where Marlon Brando orders a coffee, so I'm do a cappuccino, por favor. And they brought me 2 coffees. Now, I only wanted 1, but it worked. I went, this works. Grazie, prego. So, and you play, and in that way, it becomes something you want to do more of. It's very different, and it looks like a little thing, but you consider that in the U.S. is something like 95% of the people that start a foreign language never get anywhere with it. At that point, I say, maybe it isn't student motivation, maybe it's the teaching method. Just a thought, yeah. So you are, at least to go to your question about what I'm interested in, I am most interested in getting you curious about modeling all the excellence there is in the world around you. And that means people in this room as well. Because it's the thing that you go, that little thing, that means you've mastered it. If you're going to come and tell me how to do math really well because you struggle with it, you're not the person I want to learn it from. I want to learn it from the person that just kind of does it. It's a game. It's interesting. They can just do that. The person who they're caught on a ship, and they're sailing the Mediterranean, and they've got a can of tomatoes, and they've caught a fish, and a gourmet meal comes out of the galley. Now that's the person I want to find out their cooking strategy. But they're going, well, you just throw this together, throw this. And it's the same thing for other kinds of skills, where it's the thing that you don't think very much of. Oh, how do you quiet a baby? A few years back, some people figured out how to do this. They were selling that program. And if you have a crying baby, suddenly that's a high priority item. So all kinds of excellence besides the usual ones that are in the finance area or in creativity area or management area and so forth, which are also there for the offering. So what we're doing here is simplifying so you can get a sense. We've got time as a dimension to pay attention to. You've got other people as a dimension to pay attention to. And then I suggested that there's another dimension coming up this way which has to do with the importance of something. I'm just talking about criteria, values. You ever hear somebody saying higher values? I want to appeal to your higher values. Ever hear anybody say, hey, I want to appeal to your lower values? No, but we know what it means. Now, this is giving you a little insight into where NLP is going, because you may have heard the official line that it's based on generative transformational grammar, which, by the way, was repudiated in 1980 as being an insufficient model, as models are often, and replaced by another model called generative semantics, which was replaced by another model called the minimalist program, and so on and so on. The model that I'm going to just hint at a little bit here and play with and let you realize that there is something that's neurolinguistics is called cognitive linguistics. And in the field of cognitive linguistics, they've noticed phrases like looking forward to something. Right? I'm looking forward to that. Oh, put it behind you. Well, come on, let's raise this argument to a higher level, really. And we hear these natural language forms. And what I want you to become attuned to is these are modeling tools for you. These are tools to find out how a person has a problem. If somebody says, I can't see it, what do we know? They can't see it, right. And then you say, well, make a big picture of that goal. I can't see it. Well, then you want to start with something, may have to take them to a store and show it to them. I mean, there's different ways to do this. And realizing the literalness of language is where Grinder and Bandler really started to move. They said, when we took people literally, is when the field started to really take shape. In the same way about values, that somebody talking about something that's higher, now they do this also, they analyze, they'll go, well, this is really important, right? And they'll put the hands up. They won't go, this is really important. They don't tend to do that. No. So communication is redundant. You can hear it in the language, these kinds of orientations. You can also see people do it. Somebody comes up and says, I'm beside myself today. I like it better when they say, I'm not myself. I go, who are you? But think about that in a new way. Somebody says, I'm not myself. That's incongruence. Their familiar feelings are not available to them. Somebody's saying, I just don't feel like myself. So, wow, that could be really interesting. Just you got to get out of that stuff, People talk about getting into a state, getting out of a state. Somebody's in a stew. You can say, hey, step out. Literally. In other words, when you hear these language forms, you can begin to respond with something that strategically can help them take that to a different place. And the point is, it's all there to be practiced. They asked Grinder and Bandler if they'd ever taught this stuff to deaf or blind people. They said all the time. So the point being that most people are not paying attention to what's right before their eyes, for what's there to be heard, and the effects thereof. What I'd like to do to start out this afternoon is to have you do, same group one last time, what I did with Judy up here. I'd like you to have the person and you have them with their goal. You have that pathway. Yeah? You've got those resources in. That all took place already. I want you to talk to them about what's important about that goal. Now, this has 3 forms to it in terms of the practice. One form is I want you to realize that you can take people's thoughts in certain directions. And also, you notice my nonverbals. What's important to you about that? I don't say, what's important to you about that? What's important to you about that? No, we go up. What's important to you about that? And when they answer, and Judy, you were wonderful because you ignored my question. You're a good politician. And she started to give me the details. She didn't go to a higher value. She went to a more sensory-based experience. Second form, I want you to be able to hear that. I want you to really begin to be able to hear when people are answering your questions. This is Erickson's thing. It's like Erickson always knew the answer to a question before he asked it. People went, well, why did he ask it then?
To confirm it.
No, he asked it to get the other person to do something with their neurology, with their mind, with their body. So that he knew if he was asking a question, and I'm not saying he asked this question, but he knew if he asked a question such as, what's important about that? He knew that that was going to carry the person's thoughts, if they followed the question, to the higher value, the higher criteria. He also knew that if they didn't answer the question, if they answered something else, and he knew what he asked, that was information. It told you more about the person's model of the world. In Judy's case, somebody very grounded, very factual. She wants to, she's someone that things happen in the world with. She's not floating around up here. And so this was a bit, so then I took another phrase, I said, and what's important about that? And then you kind of went up just a little, and so then I asked him, what's important about that? And I'm calibrating as she, and this is the third form, she got emotional, yes? People start to engage their neurology and their higher values and notice how that higher value is expressed in this goal. And you see that, and you want to see that. Because that makes that goal that much more desirable. Now they know why they're going for it. We're talking about the guy who wants to be a millionaire. People sometimes lose track of what was so important about that goal. They wake up and find out they're still chasing a dream, and it's not their dream anymore. But if you can go for the values in that, you can help the person realize that's one expression of that. And Judy says, and an important one. And I agree. And that also lets the person know that's one way that you're going to fulfill those values. That's also liberating. That's choice. And the other is that in that relationship, person realizes more desire for going for that goal. So we're doing a few things here, and a lot of them are more perceptual than they are technique. It's because we're integrating these things. I'm taking them apart and I'm putting them together. So once again, very simple. You're going to bring the person up, you remind them who you are, who they are, who their goal is, and having done that, then you're going to ask them, what's important about this? Sincerely, and looking at them, calibrating